This is Stand Up for the Truth, addressing important issues and topics affecting Christians across the nation.
Hey there, it's Crash Connell. We made it to January 21st. Exciting watching all the executive orders. We're hoping that he will make sub-zero weather illegal soon, so we don't have to put up with that anymore. I mean, if he can save TikTok, surely he can do something about the weather.
You'd think. Yes.
Hello, Mary Danielson.
Hello. Yes, make the weather great again. Of course, that's a matter of time, I guess. But, these executive orders are absolutely fantastic. Pardons for the January 6th victims, withdrawal from the Paris Accord, withdrawal from WHO, and you mentioned the UN.
Yep. That was the first one. I cheered.
Yeah.
I jumped up and cheered. My blanket fell off.
It's too cold for that, Crash. Yeah, two genders. The federal government will only recognize two genders. Pardons for the victims of January 6th, the Gulf of America.
Mount McKinley.
Mount McKinley, yeah, from Mount Denali to Mount McKinley. And
incandescent bulbs.
It's funny because in 2016, when this was still kind of on the front page, my first request was that he would bring back incandescent bulbs. And so I had to wait 8 years, but hey, it's all good.
Maybe daylight saving time will go away too.
Wow, what a day to wake up. Today, my guest is Jim Fletcher. And for some reason, every time we have Jim on, it's a timely point in the news cycle. And today is absolutely no different. So let's get going here. My scripture verse is Psalm 44, 1-3. And we're going to pray, and we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff with Jim. Psalm 44, 1-3. We have heard with our ears, O God, what our fathers have told us, the deeds you did in their days, in days of old. You drove out the nations with your hand, but them you planted. You afflicted the peoples and cast them out. For they did not gain possession of the land by their own sword, nor did their own arm save them. But it was your right hand, your arm, and the light of your countenance, because you favored them. Let's pray. O Lord, you are righteous in all your ways, gracious, near to those who call upon you. You are an ever-present help in times of trouble. Lord, we trust in that. This is our lifeline, Lord, on such difficult days at times in this life. We give our day to you. We desire that you walk among us, that we would be sensitive to your leading. We lift up our nation, Lord, as we enter into a new season of leadership, and we pray for our new president and staff, for his safety, for your hand of grace upon him every single day, Lord. We lift up Israel and their place in the nations, surrounded by those who would seek to destroy her. We know that you are working out their redemption, and what a day that will be. We lift up Jim and his labors for you. Thank you for his love for Israel. Continue to give him wisdom and skill to communicate to the church how important it is to have your heart for Israel. We ask that you bless him and keep him healthy. In Jesus' name, amen. Jim Fletcher, one of my favorite people in the whole world, is a longtime supporter of Israel, an independent researcher and writer, speaker and editor, Bible prophecy teacher. His work can be seen at The God That Answers, and that's at patreon.com. So you can go to patreon.com/The God That Answers, or just go to Patreon and you can search for The God That Answers. Welcome to back to Stand Up for the Truth, Jim. It's cold even by you.
Very cold here, but great to be with you as always.
Yeah, really awesome to have you on with us. I want to just talk briefly. There's so much we can talk about, especially when it comes to Israel. They are the headline also over the weekend, but maybe people wouldn't know that necessarily, considering the cycle that we're in with the inauguration. But I remember back in 2020 when the election was stolen, and you were passionate about what had happened. You were very disappointed. Now we've made it through these 4 very agonizing years, and here we are. And so I just want to ask you your first impressions. How are you feeling about the inauguration? How much did you get to see? What are some of the high points for you?
Yeah, I like some people I saw on social media, I watched all day. Never done that before, and in fact, I consider myself to be fairly political, but I don't remember watching a full inauguration before.
Yeah.
I know I did Reagan, probably did George W. Bush at least once.
Yeah.
But yesterday was unprecedented. I mean, nobody's ever seen anything like that. So I watched from morning to night, and the highlights for me were the inaugural speech itself was very in your face. I wasn't fully expecting that, but it was just wonderful, honestly. And and then, ending in the evening with him sitting in the Oval Office, signing these executive orders, and then just having this freewheeling conversation with reporters was nobody's ever seen anything like that before. So he's a transformational character, and we won't see one like him again. But hopefully, hopefully this is the start of a lot of good things.
Yeah, that was very refreshing. You picked the highlights that we had as well. I watched him get sworn in, and then he gave the speech, and the people sitting to his left, the former presidents and other scoundrels, he didn't mince any words. He doesn't care. He basically said, we got a lot of fixing to do of all the damage that's been done over the last 4 years. And it's more than 4 years, of course. It goes back farther than that. And so Tim and I just looked at each other and kind of grinned. And then that conversational banter while he was signing these executive orders, I thought was absolutely fantastic. What a glimpse of who he really, really is and how refreshing that is. So I share those highlights with you. What a day, indeed. Big story. Let's move on here to the Israel hostage deal. Yeah, if people will remember, Trump said, "Get this going, or all hell will be brought to bear." And we need to take a look at this. It was eclipsed by the events yesterday. So, the big story, and one of your articles here. Let's look at this. 3 Israeli captives released. I watched as these 3 women were welcomed back to civilization. I was surprised that they looked as good as they did health-wise. I'm very happy for them. It's beyond words. What were your initial thoughts on that? And I want to preface that by saying, too, that I was surprised this is going to drag out over 6 weeks, but that's probably another discussion. What were your initial thoughts on seeing them released? I got choked up.
Well, any thinking, feeling person would have that has to be your response. I mean, it was, of course, exceptional moment for them and their families, and that. The deal overall, though, and I hate to be a curmudgeon, I don't want to be, but my main thought is it's completely outrageous that these Hamas demons are dictating terms to the Israelis and to the Americans. I mean, until now, hopefully. But that's because of international moral weakness. The weakness of Western diplomats and politicians. Hamas should have been finished a year ago. And so, we can talk about the deal if you want. I don't have as many positive things to say as I wish I did. I certainly hope that the other live hostages are released, but to dribble this out over 6 weeks is outrageous.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was real disappointed. I want to set up a little bit of a moral dilemma here about just sort of humor me. I don't believe I'm playing devil's advocate. I think that people maybe have thought this. Let me just set this up for a minute here. Concerning hostage taking in general, Hamas played the hostage card. No surprises there. There are no winners, absolutely not. The reprobate wickedness that brought about this situation 15 months ago, that's one topic. Torturing innocent hostages, that's another topic altogether. And it's hard to know what to think. And we can't negotiate with terrorists. I agree with that completely in principle. On a different hand, as I think this through, I think doesn't that just punish the hostages further and marginalize the agony that we feel for them? It kind of tells us how to think about them. And I hate to even say that, but I struggle with that because they are getting away with tormenting these people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. To me, getting the innocent out and let God sort out the rest. I don't think that works on a geopolitical level, but this is what goes through my mind. Does that translate into geopolitics? I don't think so. But the terrorists count on the humans being weak in this area, so that's why hostage taking succeeds in the first place. But we got to defend the defenseless, Jim. I think it's a moral dilemma that like I said, there are no winners. Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah, I go back to what I said before. All of this has caused in a way, not primarily by Hamas. It's caused by Western weakness going back decades.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the first American president to really openly appease terrorism was Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes back to the late 70s. And since then, you know, dragging Menachem Begin in Israel to Camp David in 79 and berating him and demanding that they turn over the Sinai to Egypt. I mean, that's unprecedented history, that the victor in a war would be required to turn over territory captured. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But Carter's anti-Jewish feeling started all that. And there's a lot of anti-Jewish feeling even in the West. And I think that emboldened the terrorists. They saw very clearly that, you know, their rewards for heinous acts, murder, hijackings, kidnappings, torture, they got what they wanted. And so that set the precedent. And so the answer for me is, and I'm hoping that Trump will do this, you have to fundamentally uproot terrorism. You've got to topple the regime in Tehran. You've got to get rid of that state sponsor of terrorism, and then completely destroy Hamas, Hezbollah, and then you won't be in these situations. I do think that negotiating with terrorists is a really, really bad move. I completely get wanting your loved ones back. And, you know, in a way, it's sad that we even have to quantify, what qualify my remarks by saying, oh, of course we want of course we do.
Right.
You know, but you have to look at the hard choices to prevent this to begin with. And I think going in initially, if Israel had been able to, then they were shackled by the Biden regime, period.
Yeah.
If they had had no constraints at the end of 2023, go in and level the Gaza Strip, make it so painful for Hamas that nobody would ever try it again. And that's the model going forward. Whether that'll happen or not, who knows?
Yeah, well, that's the best possible answer, Jim, on all of that stuff. Carter, I mean, no love lost between any of us and Jimmy Carter when the Ayatollah came in and the hostages were taken. In that case, in 1979, I remember it was the day my eldest brother got married when those hostages were taken, and I was maybe 20. I didn't know the Lord, but I wanted to get to a news source and I wanted to find out what was going on because that stunned me even at that age. And then it took Reagan to get these hostages out. So this has been a pattern for far too long. Absolutely just, wow. Nothing good to say about Jimmy Carter. Terrorists have been released. The exchange, the great exchange of these terrorists. I wish that wasn't part of the deal, but now what? Who are these people that were exchanged? I'm afraid to ask you, Jim, because I know this cannot possibly be a good answer.
Yeah, they're Hamas. They're other Palestinian terror factions. They are many of them are stone cold murderers. The murders of the Fogel family several years ago in Israel, the entire family was slaughtered in their home, including the children. They're being released. Wow. That's unacceptable. It's just unacceptable this should happen. And so my hope is, and this is really more probably in the realm of fantasy, my hope is that this is all a feint by the Israelis and now Trump. I hope that Trump and Netanyahu have coordinated some kind of backroom deal. What that will be, I don't know. But what I keep in the back of my mind, though, is the pagers incident in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Yeah. Israel came out of nowhere with an epic takedown of Hezbollah with these exploding pagers. I'm hoping there's something that they're going to track these guys. And I, you know what, even a lot of evangelicals, even some pro-Israel friends of mine would strongly disagree with me But I hope they hunt every one of these guys down and eliminate them. Because if they don't, they're going to kill more Jews. And that's the only thing that matters to me. I don't care about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed with that. This article you have, Redemption of Captives, again, is at the God That Answers on Patreon. Hamas is also gleeful that Israeli society is torn. 2 government ministers have threatened to quit over the deal, exactly because negotiating with such monsters ensures it will happen again and again. Nothing's being fixed here. I remember watching over the weekend the Gazans, marching in the streets with their guns and excitement and all that, and the sound was not up, but they were chanting. And I understand they were saying, "We will go to Jerusalem. We will sacrifice millions of martyrs." Now, that did not make the nightly news. There was dancing in the streets. And it was because they intend to continue their goal, which, of course, is to wipe Israel off the map. But these little video bites on the news, people don't understand that aspect of it. I wish Westerners understood more that this doesn't fix anything, unfortunately. Any thoughts on that? I wrote a great article, by the way.
Thank you. The West will not understand until they start coming through your bedroom window. That's the only time it's going to register with people here. We're too far removed from that part of the world. It doesn't really affect our lives. But you notice, and this is every time there's some situation where people are indifferent, and then it happens to them. I mean, this can be in a family relationship. If there's a problem somewhere, somebody creating a problem, nobody gets involved unless they're doing it to them. Well, it's the same principle here, and compounded. The problem is compounded because overall, people don't really care about Jews or like Jews, and so that adds to their burden. Nobody is. When Israel was a surprise attacked in 73 by Egypt and Syria, nobody cared for 3 weeks until they started winning. And it was only when Sharon was an hour from Cairo, and in the north they were an hour from Damascus, that the world, Kissinger and the Russians got involved in a ceasefire, because you got to put a stop to Israel winning. If Israel's losing, if Jews are being murdered, nobody cares.
Interesting. It's an interesting time in the whole war cycle anyway. And I want to ask you about this because it sounds to us, at least the Westerners in Gaza, that it has been pretty much substantially destroyed. Hezbollah is still in a daze. Iran is laying low because Syria is in a state of flux, among other reasons. Things are very different in the Middle East than they were 15 months ago. Do you think that this is as good a time as any, if there can be such a thing, as to get those hostages out? I mean, 80% of the terrorists are gone in Gaza, and of course, like you said, if there's one left, there's still a problem. But as far as the timing goes on this, do you think the ceasefire is going to hold? Do you think that they're actually going to stop fighting? And I know part of both of us says we can't ever stop fighting, but just from an observational perspective, do you think that with all the Lord did for Israel over the last 15 months, that maybe things, it's a good time to wind things down, or not necessarily?
Well, it's not a good time to wind things down. I suspect what's going on is that the entire thought process here is to get as many live hostages out as you possibly can. So Israel is going to bite their tongue for 6 weeks.
Okay.
Wow. But then they're going to go back in and finish off Hamas. I thought it was really an interesting comment by Trump. I think it was yesterday. As he was assuming office, he made a statement that something like, he's not so sure about this ceasefire now. Well, I think that was always his. He was being more even-handed right up to yesterday.
Yeah, right.
And I think that, as I said before, there must be some agreement between him and the Israelis. Look, let's just do this dance with them for 6 weeks and then go in and finish them off.
Okay.
I think Israel's going to go for the best deal they can with the hostages, and then they'll do what they have to do to Hamas and Gaza. I remember right after October 7th, 23, the Israel defense minister made an interesting statement, and he said, Gaza will never go back to what it was. And I don't think they've backed off of that. I think that is their guiding principle in this.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever happens at the end, Hamas will be removed from Gaza.
Mm. And I heard someone say that yesterday as well. And I heard Trump say, I think it was on Sunday, that this isn't really what he was looking for. Because initially he said, get them all out by the time I take my oath of office. And that's what he expected. That's what he wanted. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but at least, and it's easy for me to say this here. I don't have any inside information, but you know what? To me, Hamas called his bluff. I mean, I thought it was clear weeks ago. Maybe I was wrong in what he said. I thought they were all supposed to be home by now.
Yeah.
Hamas,
right.
What does Hamas have to lose? They're only extending their own life a little bit. It's to their advantage to extend this as long as they can. And so Hamas just said, we're not releasing these people. They know, and we all know, that the only reason Hamas is still alive is because they have hostages.
Right.
Once they don't have any live hostages, they're dead men. Mm-hmm. And so I think they, in some way, called Trump's bluff. Now, he's going to have the last laugh, but dealing with these demons over there is very different than dealing with killers anywhere else. They're not rational, and so you have to deal with them a different way, which is why, and we can talk about this later, and I think we should. The new special envoy to the Middle East for him, Steve Witkoff. Man, I hope this guy has more discernment than his predecessors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I need to do some homework on him. I haven't had a chance to look into who he is, but this deal does not require Hamas to disarm or give over the control of the Gaza. That to me absolutely has to change. I know you say here in one of your articles, the Strip looks like a wasteland. Estimates are it will take years to rebuild. Just the cleanup of millions of tons of concrete and steel will take an enormously long time. And what about the tunnels? Are there still tunnels left? Are hostages in the tunnels? That makes me nervous too. Jim, do they know where all the hostages are, do you think?
I think they do.
Okay.
In fact, this came out just in the last week, and I had suspected this, but evidently Israel has known where most of them are for the last few months.
Okay.
The problem, of course, is there was an attempted rescue several months ago, and as soon as they were almost in the building, the IDF, the terrorists shot 6 hostages in the head. And so they know that if they tried a big hostage rescue now, they would simply kill all the hostages. And so that's why they've not been able to go in and get them. Mm-hmm. There's still tunnels left. There's all sorts of things. But what you touched on with the destruction of the Gaza Strip itself is a win for Israel strategically.
Okay.
Because yes, that's something people don't really think about. I mean, we see the pictures of the destroyed buildings, but all experts have said that it will take not years, but decades to rebuild the Gaza Strip. Okay. It will take years just to clean up the steel and concrete rubble. You have to do that before you can get to the point of building a new building. It will take the people of Gaza, and again, I have a little harsher view than a lot of people do. Just like in Nazi Germany, the German people claiming they didn't know about the camps, that was a lie. Mm-hmm. The Palestinian people being under the heel of Hamas, they voted for Hamas. They are Hamas.
Yeah, right.
1.5 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, virtually all of them are supportive of what has happened. And so, rebuilding it, the last thing I'll say about that for right now is I don't want one American tax dollar going to rebuild anything in Gaza. My hope for Gaza, the Gaza Strip, is that it will become an Israeli resort. That's what I want to see.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, I want to see all this end, and there are a lot of things I want to see, like not another dime going to Kiev and Ukraine, and there are so many things that were mishandled and just defy any common sense on a geopolitical level. I mean, I don't think Americans realize to what degree we've been duped, and things have been done that none of us would ever agree to by people that supposedly we, not me, voted for. I think we are all getting a wake-up call, I think, fixing all of this damage. So,
yeah, Trump mentioned that yesterday. He
Did
put
he?
the number on it that Biden never did. He said $200 billion to Ukraine. That's got to stop. Of course, they've also announced that there's a 90-day freeze on all foreign aid pending review. Thank God.
yeah, no kidding. I felt that was one of the most betraying things, to give American taxpayers money and then to watch the people in North Carolina shiver and suffer from that hurricane. I thought was just an abomination. And I'm hoping, I don't know if Trump mentioned anything about the wildfires or the hurricane victims. I'm hoping that that'll be rectified as well.
Yeah, he's supposed to go to California Friday.
Okay. Wow. Very interesting. Alan Dershowitz has an article. It wasn't a deal, it was a crime. He says the decision, this is yesterday, over the weekend, the decision by the Israeli government to make significant concessions to the Hamas kidnappers should never be called a deal. It was an extortion. The kidnapping was a crime, and the extortion demand was an additional crime. When a terrorist group negotiates, quote unquote, with a democracy, it always has the upper hand. The terrorists are not constrained by morality, law, or truth. They can murder at will, rape at will, torture at will, and threaten. The democracy, on the other hand, must comply with the rules of law and must listen to the pleas of the hostage families. Wow. And then he says, especially complicit with blood on their hands are supporters of Hamas on university campuses who chant for intifada and revolution. Also complicit are international organizations such as the ICC that treat Israel and Hamas as equals. Wow, the universities, haven't heard a lot about that, but it's got to still be going on, Jim. They just don't want us to know all these Americans who are siding with Hamas. There's a absolute moral disaster. Are you aware of what's still going on in the States as far as supporting Hamas through these young people with their brains full of mush on university campuses?
Yeah, a couple of things about that. It is still going on, and but Trump has promised that they're going to deport people who are supportive of Hamas. Those people, especially foreign nationals, they're going to get them out of here. The other thing that he said he's going to do, and he's put all these colleges and universities on notice, if you allow anti-Semitic stuff on your campuses, no more federal funding and no more accreditation.
Wow.
Okay? So the Harvards and Columbias and all those, they'd better get in line and fix the problem there. But I'll add something to that I think a lot of people aren't thinking about. When he said that, I thought somebody better tell Fuller Seminary in Southern California and Wheaton College in Chicago the same thing. They are hotbeds of anti-Israel activism, every bit as much as the others. They may not be out on campus with Palestinian flags, and then again, they may be, but they're every bit as bad, and they have to be dealt with as well. This is 100 years of left-wing professors soaking those people in Marxist ideology. It's a real problem, but they will force the colleges to at least get in line with the accreditation and funding issue.
Yeah. Wow. More good news. It just seems like we got a lot of good news coming our way, a lot of justice and common sense. And I think all Americans are on board with that. Jim Fletcher, we're speaking with today, The God That Answers at patreon.com. Really, really suggest you look into his articles. And we're going to talk more about Israel and anti-Semitism and all those things that are going on at the same time. We'll be right back. 2 more minutes. Stay with me.
Thank you so much for sharing today's Stand Up for the Truth video podcast We invite you to check out our other headline news site, ctrnn.org. That's ctrnn.org.
Feedback, questions, and topic suggestions are always appreciated. Email us at comments@standupforthetruth.com.
Welcome back to Stand Up for the Truth for this Tuesday. Very, very cold Tuesday throughout a lot of our country. Talking to Jim Fletcher today. His blog at Patreon is The God That Answers. Fantastic insights. Highly recommend. Jim, during the break, we were talking a little bit about transferring the population of Gaza to some other country. Tell us a little bit about that. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, this is just new in the last few days, an idea being floated. And I think it had its sources from within the Trump administration. You know, his new Middle East envoy, a guy named Steve Witkoff, is he's an attorney, a real estate developer.
Okay.
He's known Trump for years. Again, I don't know what he knows about the Middle East, but the idea is that this is ostensibly an idea to because the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip is going to be so extensive and long term. They're talking about moving all or most of the Palestinians there to Southeast Asia, like to Indonesia, and just putting them there and until such time as they can come back. Now, I'll tell you and your audience, I hope that's permanent, and I hope they mean it to be permanent. I hope they're telling them it's temporary to get them out of the country, because you've got hardcore generational killers in Gaza right next to Israel. They've got to get them out of the region.
Yeah.
The other Arab states don't want them. Okay, so if Saudi Arabia is not going to give a big chunk of their desert to them,
That's right.
get them out of the region altogether. Indonesia is a brilliant idea, and I hope it happens. They probably will have to do something because, and I didn't quite realize this either until this week, but apparently the winters can be quite cold in Gaza. And so, if you don't have much shelter, that's an issue. But anyway, the idea of moving them to Southeast Asia is pretty interesting, and I hope it happens. I absolutely do.
Yeah, me too. That would be sort of unprecedented, I think, in my lifetime. I don't think I've heard of anything like that ever taking place. But the Middle East is... go ahead. 20
years ago, there were Israeli politicians, people in the Knesset who were, they'd be called right-wing,
Sure.
but they were absolutely calling for outright population transfer. I agreed with it then, and I agree with it now, but it's been a dirty word until now. But again, Israel completely obliterating the infrastructure in the Gaza Strip is a game changer in their war against Hamas.
It is. A lot of victories. The Lord was definitely with them in so many ways. When you look at the numbers, all the terrorists that were killed and tunnels destroyed, miles and miles of tunnel. I mean, it's just an incredible story. Circling back just a little bit, because I want to talk about a poll that was taken very recently. And the headline is "Nearly Half of the World's Population Holds Anti-Semitic Views, Alarming Poll Finds." And this article with Alan Dershowitz, just last paragraph of his says, we're talking about the students sympathizing with Hamas. The students of terror, the university students, this is Alan Dershowitz, who are encouraging Hamas into continuing their murderous ways must be held accountable for their complicity in evil. Though they may have the same First Amendment rights as Jews do, they should be treated with the same contempt that Nazis, the KKK, and racist supporters of violence are treated. First Amendment does not give them a right even to be hired by decent employers. So there's something that needs to happen there. And so I just wanted to finish that article and then go to this. Half the world's population holds anti-Semitic views. That's more than I thought, Jim. The article starts out, this is by Dean Dwyer, by the way, on Harbinger's Daily. He says, on July 10th, 1933, Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda, was featured on the front cover of Time. The headline was unambiguous and inflammatory. It said, "Say in your dreams the Jews are to blame." As we are all painfully aware, in the years that followed, millions of Jews across Europe were terrorized, hunted, and murdered not only by the Nazis, but those who collaborated with them. Hatred of the Jews did not end there, and it is an inescapable fact that the same anti-Semitism which drove hatred of the Jews in the 30s is once again infecting the hearts of many today. Jim, I never thought I'd see the day, but that's a whole other subject. So he says, here's the concerning data of this recent poll. 20% of respondents have never heard of the Holocaust. That's amazing. 48% of respondents recognize the Holocaust's accuracy, falling to 39% among 18 to 34-year-olds. Of course, I expect nothing else of that. 40% of those under 35 say the Jews are responsible for most of the world's wars. 23% of respondents worldwide expressed favorable opinions toward the terror group Hamas, which increases to 29% among respondents younger than 35. So, bottom line, 46% of the world's adult population, which is 2.2 billion people, harbor deeply entrenched anti-Semitic attitudes. This is more than double compared to the Anti-Defamation League's first survey a decade ago. This is the highest level ever since they started tracking these trends globally. And social media adds to that. We live in a different world where these ideologies can, be spread to ignorant people instantly. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm still dealing with this cover of Time magazine that I didn't know actually took place. Shame on them, of course. What are your thoughts on this particular survey? It is alarming.
Very alarming. The numbers are not all that surprising. In certain ways, I'm surprised it's not higher. The millennial issue is a serious problem, as we all know. But I'll tell you where I lay the blame at for much of this is the church, or the church leaders, because for more than 100 years in Europe and the United States, there has been a move to mythologize the Bible, particularly the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures. And in the lead up to the Nazis, the German church ignored teaching the Old Testament. They sanitized it from their teachings. Well, when you do that, you remove Jewish history from it, and now the Jews aren't legitimate anymore. And so that is where much of this has come from. Certainly the political structure has been bad and that sort of thing, but the church completely dropped the ball on teaching the Jewishness of the Bible. I'm still stunned, and I do encounter people like this from time to time that don't know Jesus is a Jew. Christians that don't think he's a Jew. And, they do the old, the Jews killed Christ stuff and all that. Right. The church has failed in its obligation to teach proper Jewish history, and that is exactly why those numbers you cited are where they are. That didn't come out of nowhere. And I can't blame the church enough for dropping the ball on all that.
Yeah, it is very disturbing. I thought this was interesting. It says here, interestingly, even though there's a clear anti-Semitic attitude infecting the world, when asked about sentiments towards the nation of Israel, the results were more favorable. 67%. Which makes no sense. I admit that. 67% don't want their country to boycott Israeli products and businesses. 71% believe their country should have diplomatic relationships with Israel. And 75% welcome tourists from Israel. And to me, Jim, that's all about the almighty dollar, this whole divesting, because they'd have to give up the chip in their mobile phone. Look, if you're going to protest everything Israel's ever done, good luck with that. Now you got to make a list of all the medical devices and all the electronic devices that they use every single day. And if they don't give up those things, it's just sheer hypocrisy. That always amuses me on a weird kind of level. Also, there are some, it says here, who try to hide their anti-Semitism by claiming that they're simply anti-Zionists. So now we're talking about the land. We're talking about them being usurpers. And even though, of course, you and I both know that is their land, but the world doesn't see it that way. No one seems to understand what that land is even about, Jim.
Well, no, they don't. I mean, Bible history aside, people don't even know history.
Yeah.
Secular history. They don't have the bare knowledge of anything that happened past 5 minutes ago. Now, I do have an answer for the Israel thing, not boycotting Israel, but they have a problem with Jews. I told you this story before, but it's one of the most profound things anybody ever said to me. And 20 years ago, I was visiting with a book rep in the Christian market, and I was frustrated about the inability to really sell pro-Israel books to the Christian market. And he said something to me that just, it really changed my thinking. He said, listen, the church loves Israel. They don't like Jews.
Wow.
That's the answer. That's the answer. There is a disconnect with primarily Christians. There's a disconnect between Israel and Jews. They sort of like some form of Bible Israel, the Israelites. We heard that in Sunday school. It was on the flannel graph. It was, it's this. We kind of know that. But then they have been taught the worst anti-Semitic garbage, medieval level anti-Jew stuff. The Jews control money in the world. They start wars. They're greedy. They're evil. They are not comfortable with Jewish people. But in some sense, they kind of, Israel, okay, I can understand that. I've heard that in the Bible. I've heard that in Sunday school or the pulpit. But that, I really think that's a lot of what's going on. People do not have an appreciation for Jewish history and how important the Jews are to the world. And people ask me, why do you support Israel? Why do you support the Jews? They are on God's mind and on his heart. And if you doubt that, please do this as homework. Go read the Old Testament. It's all Jewish. It's all pointing toward a Jewish Messiah. Okay? If people have a proper understanding of who the Jews are, then their thinking is correct and we don't have these problems.
Yeah. Yeah, and even to begin to study, not just reading the Old Testament is a great start, and then study it and study these covenants God made with the Jews. Their redemption is tied to that land. You cannot separate those two things. If you read Ezekiel, it's plain as day that the land has to do with their redemption, a coming redemption that the church also doesn't believe in because of replacement theology. Boy, the devil's been working overtime, Jim, to make sure that Christians can't even understand systematic theology when it comes to the Old Testament and that where the Jews fit in there. It's kind of shocking to me, but I suppose I shouldn't be shocked. But one thing just leads to another. Replacement theology is absolutely demonic. And then I think, well, don't they read Romans? Jim, it's not ambiguous. It's not a puzzlement.
Well, again, this is a conglomeration of things, and I'm glad you mentioned replacement theology because it's a scourge in the American church.
Yeah, it is.
And replacement theology is this diabolical idea that God has transferred the promises in the Old Testament to the Jews and given them to the church. Okay, so the idea is that Ezekiel 37, the dry bones chapter, somehow now is about the church. It was never about the church. It wasn't about the church when it was recorded. It's never going to be about the church. In the chapter, God himself said, this is the house of Israel. Okay? But because American Christians by and large don't know much Bible and they're not taught it in church, they don't know these things. And so that's a serious problem. I'll just add real quickly, because I love to know why things are the way they are. This really started in earnest in the late 19th century in the U.S., because what happened was in the mid-19th century, Darwinian philosophy was introduced to the world. And Darwinian philosophy will lead to the Bible being myth, okay? And once that was established in people's minds, then the Jewish people don't have any legitimate claim to the land. And as you see today, a lot of people, too many people, think they don't have a right to live. And so Darwinian philosophy started it, and then the churches became infected with it. And now you have this allegories and spiritualizing of Old Testament passages for the Jews, and now somehow it has to do with the church. It's the height of theological arrogance, but it's where the American church is today.
Yeah, it certainly is. another article here, vilifying the Jewish state. The Pope proves once again he has no understanding of God's word. Now, this doesn't surprise us, but people listen to this man, and this is a recent, just a couple days old headline. Pope Francis once again is vilifying the Jewish state. According to World Israel News, in an address last week, he castigated the Jewish state over what he described as the shameful humanitarian conditions in Gaza during the ongoing war against Hamas. His speech was riddled with false accusations against Israel, reportedly including claims that the Jewish state is bombing civilians and leaving Gazan children to freeze to death. And then we all know at Christmas time, the Vatican had this nativity scene with the baby Jesus lying on a keffiyeh, Yasser Arafat neck scarf thing. It's unimaginable, Jim. It's so moronic. The notion that Jesus was a Palestinian is ridiculous. But the church, the progressive church of these last days, the Laodicean industrial complex, they believe all this stuff. Drives me crazy. So the Pope's no help. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the Pope, he's the first non-European Pope. He's South American, and he's a Marxist.
Right. Oh, that's right.
He's a Marxist. He's a totalitarian, and he pals around with totalitarians. Now, it's interesting that I saw this back in the 90s. I was reading Christianity Today one day, and I was reading a column by Philip Yancey.
Oh, sure.
And Philip Yancey is just really a popular Christian author, and all that. Evangelicals love him. He referred to Jesus as a Palestinian rabbi.
Wow.
And Jesus was never a Palestinian.
Wow.
And I wrote to him, and he understood the point, but he doubled down. So you've got popular evangelical teachers like that. Mm-hmm. Another writer, Donald Miller, that wrote Blue Like Jazz.
Yep.
In 2012, he went to what he called Israel Palestine, and he was hosted by the PLO. And he came away and wrote a blog post about the IDF committing war crimes against the Palestinians. Wow. Nothing substantiated. It was just accusations like soldiers shot a 12-year-old Palestinian girl in the backseat of her parents' car. No, they didn't. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
But he was promoting anti-Semitic garbage and injecting it into the church, and they succeeded in that. Mm-hmm. That, again, is why you have the statistics you cited, and the statistics are just as bad if you polled churches. This is why. Anti-Jewish propaganda that, ironically, you mentioned this early on, very much in line with Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister. That's the kind of garbage they spread. And it's still with us in the church.
Wow. Yeah, it's dangerous, and people just don't understand. I've never seen so much left-wing progressive theology in the church. It's another thing that just grew and grew and grew over the last couple of years. Lynn Hybels,
go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead. No accountability for any of these people at all. Donald Miller, I wrote about that. I challenged him. I asked him, give me some proof of that kind of thing. He never even answered. Then he goes off and starts a marketing company that's very lucrative, and he's doing well. There's no accountability for these people at all.
No, that is absolutely true. What a mess. And then Lynn Hybels and her Christ at the Checkpoint conferences, those went on for a few years too. I thought that was absolutely appalling. The pro-Palestinian conference, yuck.
She dropped out of sight after the scandal with her husband.
Right.
And they both now have gone into retirement. I don't even think she's on social media. The problem is her 10 years of pro-Palestinian activism took root in the church, and the rotten fruit of that we're still plagued with.
Absolutely.
No accountability.
Well, they're going to have to give an account to the Lord, and I can't imagine, like, Philip Yancey is 75 years old, and I'm thinking, at some point, you're going to come face to face with the God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you're going to give an account for that.
In this life, they're too arrogant.
Yes.
They're not going to acknowledge these truths.
Right.
They're too arrogant. It comes from a spirit of arrogance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're not accountable. They're not going to be accountable in this life.
Yeah.
And they're especially not accountable by evangelical leadership in America,
which is also arrogant. So, wow. No good news there. This one, This really disturbed me. The forced absence of the Jewish state from Poland's Holocaust memorial speaks volumes. Weird, you'd expect. It is this year the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz on January 27th, which is coming up, well, rather quickly. Monday, I believe that's Monday. It has been set aside as International Holocaust Memorial Day. Every year, a special ceremony takes place at Auschwitz to remember the Holocaust, the victims, and survivors. 80 years later, 249,000 survivors are still alive. That's more than I would have thought. 49% of them live in Israel. And then heads of states come to this event every year. It's quite the formal ceremony to show their respect, join the global community in these things. But Benjamin Netanyahu was planning on attending with a delegation. It says he will not be there, and not by choice. Poland has confirmed that if Bibi steps on Polish territory, he will be immediately arrested in compliance with the do-nothing ICC arrest warrant issued in November 2024 for him and Yoav Gallant. This is absolutely mind-boggling to me, Jim. This makes no sense whatsoever. Of course, the ICC has been trying to meddle in this the whole time. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, I know what you're going to say, but I have to at least bring this out just for the sheer stupid factor.
To deny the Israeli premier from attending these ceremonies at Auschwitz is the ultimate in grotesque statecraft.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
What Netanyahu should do is go with an escort of the Golani Brigade.
Yeah.
Take the IDF with him. Poland won't lay a glove on him.
Yeah.
But he should not stay away
No.
because these punks are telling him he can't come to Auschwitz. That's almost unreal. The arrogance of people like that would say the Jewish leader of this generation can't attend the ceremonies at Auschwitz. They still want to murder Jews. It's still in their hearts. They should roll out the red carpet for him.
They should.
They should roll out a blue carpet for the Israeli prime minister. He should go with the Golani Brigade around him.
Yeah, this article, he says, this is where I believe the salt is being thrown at the Holocaust wound, a wound that will never close. And this doesn't help. And he says, here's why this is wrong. Lack of international outrage. Except for a few countries who have clearly stated they will not honor the warrant, most of the global community would arrest Bibi at worst or be completely silent about the insult to Israel. ICC warrants are binding as long as they're justified. Well, okay, we could talk about that all day long, right? In the case of Israel, the facts are clearly showing that genocide has not been committed by Bibi in this Hamas war. Double standards. He mentions double standards. There are so many countries in the world that openly commit crimes against humanity or genocide, sometimes their very own people. What about the Syrians killed by Assad over the last few years, the chemical warfare there? What about the Ukraine-Russia conflict? What about China? Why is everybody silent unless it has to do with Israel? I've just answered the question, Jim.
Here's the key to all of this, and I'm so glad the Harbinger's article you sent me referenced Genesis chapter 3. This is the foundation of everything that's going on today with the Jew hatred. In Genesis chapter 3, God is speaking to the serpent and to Adam and Eve, and he's telling them what their punishment is going to be for rebellion. And what he does is he sets what the Bible calls enmity, a state of war between the serpent and the seed of the woman. Okay, so we know who the serpent is. The serpent is Satan. It's evil. The seed of the woman is the Redeemer, the Messiah. It's Jesus Christ, who's a Jew. He set a state of war from then to the end of human history according to his own plan. That is why people hate Jews. Satan has always, in every era, wanted to kill all the Jews. He tried to kill the Messiah. He killed the babies in Bethlehem. He's tried it in every generation. That's the source of all this. Because at the end of the day, and I've had so many conversations with Israeli and Jewish friends, and they all wonder, why? Why are we hated?
Yeah.
There's a lot of secular reasons, but none of them really get to the heart of it. The heart of it is a spiritual sickness that is inborn in people.
Yeah. Wow, Jim, we could parse a lot of this out for a long time. We could spend a whole nother hour on this. I so appreciate your time. I so appreciate your insights about Israel. Praise the Lord. It's just been great having you on again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Tomorrow, Dave Jenkins in the replay. Thursday, we're doing some headlines. Friday, Alana Arguello, board member of the International Society of Christian Apologetics and author of Unearthing Yoga's Ancient Roots. I'm so excited to speak to her about such things. It's been a full hour. I hope this has been helpful to parse out some of this, but thank you for listening. We appreciate all our listeners. Have a wonderful day and stay warm out there.